Okay, we are back here with Omar's reverse. Oh, that's bad. Okay, we are here. Hi guys, we're back here with Omar's revision to this stage. He's done a really good job of cleaning up the fault lines here. They're all nice and lined up. All of the walls and props are now lined up with the ground, which is excellent. You can see he's got the P1 and P2, and I do see there's a SW1 here for the swinger, but I don't know what he's got it attached to. It appears to be blanking out. He's done also a good job of refining some of the targets here. Just there's a couple of other things. We're going to basically make this into a stage that would pass IPSC scrutiny, if you will, makes it safe and fair for everybody. As we covered in the last video, we were mentioning about, if we zoom down to this level here, we're still looking at most likely a ground impact from this port to these targets here. A very simple way of addressing this right out of the gate is to see how on this stage here, how he's got, if we look at this from the side, we have all of this area back in here, which is not really used. Very common thing for people to do when they make stages is to start and try to utilize the full size of the range rather than using the range better utilization. So what we'll do right out of the gate is we're going to take all of this and we're going to move this back. Remember, we're down on the green axis here. If you hold, one thing I forgot to mention before, if you hold down the shift key, you can temporarily lock this in whatever direction you're going. What we're going to do is we're going to just change our camera angle here a bit, get back on the green, hold our shift key, and I want to move this so that my poppers, which are the farthest item back from the stage, are right towards the back of the berm. We'll plant that sucker down. So now we don't have a lot of use here, which is not really an issue. The stage itself is exactly the same. And what this does do is it now gives our, if I'll just Control Z for a sec. So right now from this port, if I was to use our line tool, and we go from that corner to this corner of the wall, while you have this line started, if you come over to another point, in this case here I want to go to this wall, if I just hover over this edge here and I hold down the shift key, see how the line turns black? That locks this particular angle. Let me try this. So, but it doesn't work if it's not attached to another point. So as long as we hover over something that has a point assigned to it, now it locks that line on this angle. So if we go to this edge of the wall here, hold down the shift key, now we can project this line all the way across, and now we end up with a line where normally we wouldn't have anything at this edge here in order for this line to align with, I guess. So that's a handy feature. If you look at how much space we have here of side berm that we have to be careful with, just by simply grabbing everything and moving it downrange, we've now reduced this area that we have to be careful with from here to here. So that's a very, very good start to try to help you with your side impact issue. While we're on the subject, if we do look through this port here, you can see that these targets here are within view of this port, and well, we'll call this a port. So these targets here can be shot at and they will impact the side berm. So what we can do is we'll try just shifting these up just past that line. So now Actually, I could probably move that forward a bit. Remember, we're not so concerned about the target stand itself as we are with the target. So now you cannot see those targets at all. Even if you were to stand at this edge and look past here, you cannot see those targets, and they're still perfectly viewable from this edge. If we were to draw another line from this to here, we can see that our targets, even if I was to shoot at the very outside edge of this target here from this lean, we're still well within the back berm impact. So we've, just by shifting these targets back a little bit, we've solved two of those problems. So we'll do the same thing here. We want to come from this. We don't have to be super exact with this. Hover and hold the shift key. So now we can see that these targets are definitely viewable from this port and also into the side berm. So we can move these targets straight back, make sure we're on our green axis, move it to there, and now they're completely hidden. So that takes away this, and this is an issue. The other thing is, let's just say, for instance, that your range did have side impact. When we're engaging targets on an angle like this, we have to be careful with the way that we score things. Typically, and I'll exaggerate, let's just say this is your bullet diameter. That would be as if I shot that from the target straight on. When we are engaging targets where the bullet enters on an angle, we don't get a nice circle like this. If we were to engage this from the side, from this, basically from this angle here, we would end up with an elliptical hole because the bullet would be entering in on this angle. It does make it a little bit more challenging. The more extreme the engagement angle is, the more you have to worry about oblong holes, which is, if anybody's been in ROing long enough, you know that this is kind of an issue for scoring. So if possible, try to minimize the amount of engagement of targets from the side here. If the target was intended to be shot from this side, then we can come along and actually adjust the angle so that the target's as kind of straight on to the area it's supposed to be engaged from as we can. In this case here, I'm pretty sure we don't want this target engaged from that port at all. So once again, just moving it past this line here means that there's no way that we can see that target, and we didn't really affect this here. The other thing that we noticed, and I'll just revert that back for a second to where it originally was, is you see this popper hiding back here. In theory, if I was to engage this target, I would be shooting potentially through this target and hitting the steel. That also is a scoring issue, as well as even if we move this popper, we don't want anything else behind this as well that can cause any issues. So one of the other things we can use the line tool for, much in the same I can't think of the word, same reason we were using it before, is this line that I just drew would be the angle from, if I was standing at this port engaging the far edge of this target. So anything inside of this arc is behind this target and therefore in the path of the impact here. So what we can do with these is we will move them just outside of that arc, and therefore I can engage these targets, this target, there's nothing behind it, And now I know we'll fix this next, but now we can work with this to make sure that we can actually see the popper. And then if we come back over here, and I realize I didn't move these back. There, so now we can't see that. We can't see this popper from this port, which was a safety issue, which is a good thing. So now we want to be able to engage this target, the popper from here. Now that is going to be a little bit more of a challenge because we don't want to move this popper forward because we're going to be in front of this our angle for this is shooting into the side berm from this point. So I'm going to draw a line from here to that corner, and this tells me the angle that I need to avoid. Draw one from here too. This is your arc that I can see this corner of basically what I want to do is I want to keep this barrel in this arc to make sure that the barrel obscures whatever's behind it. And as long as we this is going to be tough. We don't want to get it too far ahead and get in the way of our target with the barrel behind it. I mean, yes, the majority of people will be engaging here, but you have to plan for the fact that somebody can engage this target from any angle at any of the zones. And typically when people are shooting faster, they tend to shoot wide. So I don't think we're going to get that working. Because the farther we come up here, now we're shooting into the side berm, and the distance here is a little bit too tight. We can try to move this target back and stagger these, but now I run into an interference problem. The idea is you don't want to, from a scoring point of view, you don't want to be splitting hairs about how close this is. You want there to be very clear distinction between targets so that you don't end up with where this potentially could be behind this target, and then you spend 5 minutes with every second shooter trying to argue, oh, I hit that, I didn't hit that, does this count, does it not count? You want things to be very cut and dry, make the stage run smooth. So I think for now, I'm going to just move this off the stage. Let's just leave it as that for now. In the center here, okay. In theory, this, as dumb as it is, somebody could reach through this port and shoot these targets from the side. And if you think who the hell would do that, think about it like this. Shooter starts at this point here. Now, the objective of IPSC, any good shooter, would try to minimize the amount of movement that they have to do. So the way that this is right now is they have to come obviously over to this side here to engage these targets. They have to come over to this port to engage these targets, and then they have to come over to this port and engage these, etc., etc. But what about if I decided I'm going to go from here over to this side, and now I can just run past this port, come right here, and stick my whole body through. And we know a couple of people that are tall and skinny that can probably poke their head through there and engage these targets on an edge. Now, we were saying before about there you'd have a super oblong hole in here, and not only that, but now you're just blatantly shooting into the side berm. But as per IPSC rules, if you can see it, you can shoot it. So I there's nothing really wrong with what he's got here, but let's just take all arguments out and let's just put in a set of barrels here. So now there is, even if you did stick your head through there, there is no way you're going to see that. You could also put in another wall here and things like that. This is actually something that I was planning on trying earlier. I was thinking about this. Is what about if we just copied and moved? Basically, we have half walls at our range. They're 4-foot walls. So just to simulate that, because I don't see it in his model here, I'll just move this wall halfway over. If we do that, we don't change any of the geometry here with these targets through this port. What it does do is it gives us an extra 4 feet that we can potentially move these targets back. And we're still sticking within this line here that we can see our side berm in. So there's a little bit peeking through, so maybe I'll move that up range just a hair. And as I was saying before, don't make your stages so precise that if it's not designed exactly as you have it on paper when you get to the actual day of building your stages, because the thing we're not taking into account here is this range here is dead flat, and I know for a fact that most of our ranges have some contour into it, usually towards the back. There's usually like a tiny little hump here, or it's sloped downwards for water drainage. So don't plan your stage to be so precise that little nuances like that is going to cause you issues. So here we go. Take this and we're going to rotate it just a little bit. So now I come around this corner. I have to basically do a full lean in order to engage these targets, and then less of a lean to catch this, and pretty much straight up and down I'm hitting this while I'm still into the back berm. And because we put that, we still need to put that barrel in here. Or should put this barrel in here. We're putting it in this little arc here because we know that that is in this view area from this port, so we don't have any impact. Now on match day we want to make sure, because that head here is still technically visible from this barrel, so maybe on match day we might want to put a double barrel, because remember, we don't want any question of what you can see, what you can't see. If you've got a guy that's 7 feet tall, 6'8", whatever, and he manages to clip that edge, let's say he takes 3 shots at it, but 2 of his shots graze through the lip of this barrel. So technically that is hard cover. In theory, he would not. That would be a miss, actually. So you'd have to start measuring angles and say, well, I shot it at 3 times, but these 2 went through, but my 3rd one was my first hit and it knocked the target down. It's a scoring nightmare. So let's just put a second barrel on here. Use my blue. So when you get to areas where you can see where I'm snapping on different surfaces here and just trying to get this to line up is just a pain, what I tend to do is I'll overshoot it, because we know we're still on the same blue axis here. I'm just running into problems trying to move it because of this transition or when I got close to the barrel. So I'm just going to pick up the barrel again on a different point and lock it on the blue. And this one's still causing me grief, so let's try it on this here. This is being nothing but a problem. Grab it from here. Oi. There. Just monkey around with it a little bit. So now we got a double barrel in there. There is no way that you're going to see that from here. From this edge here, I can still see the popper perfectly fine. I engage these targets. I don't have any shoot through issues between this target and any barrels or anything in behind. There's no shoot through. You can't see the target here at all. So everything works out quite well there. We've addressed somebody coming through this port and shooting these sideways, which they can't do anymore. From this area here, there's a rule, and I don't remember the rule number at this point, but we have to have a minimum of 10 meters. This is Canadian IPSC rules. 10 meters from a port or a solid surface, and 11 meters from a fault line. Okay, so we're going to check our dimension here just to make sure that we're 10 meters. Right now he's got this set in architectural scaling, dimensioning. I'll show you if we come up here to Window, Model Info, and then in the Units tab, right now he's got this set as architectural in inches. So we're going to change this from the format to decimal. And then that gives us the option to change the inches. We're going to change this to meters. And our precision, we don't need to be anywhere near that precise. There we go. And close that. So now when we dimension, we're in meters. And we want to be, we're only at 8 meters here. So this, actually, sorry, it's supposed to be from the wall. So we're at 9 meters, so we need to be 1 more meter back, which is going to change all of our dimensioning. This here, I'm pretty sure, so we're 12 meters here, so this target's fine. It's this target here that we're 9 meters, I believe we said. So we're at 9 meters. We're only a meter off. We could probably shift this guy back without too much issue. Move. I wonder if we should just move this all. Move all this stuff back. And yes, we will have to change a couple of things. We'll just shift that back. And this guy will move back to there. So now we should have our dimension from the wall to here. We're now over our 10 meters, which is fine. Then we'll just come back quickly and double check. That doesn't change. This is going to have to shift back a little bit. Our lines here, let's just change these. So when you go to do your selection tool, if I wanted to select these lines, I would have to just put the whole thing within the selection box, but you can see I'm selecting these walls and the targets and whatnot. So if that's from dragging from top left to bottom right, but if we go from bottom right to top left, you see how the circle changes from a dotted line to a solid line outline. So in order for me, if I want to pick this target, if I don't have the entire target inside of this, if I go from top left to bottom right, it won't select this. But if I go from bottom left to top right, then anything that's touching this selection box will be selected. Unfortunately, that also includes the background as well. So what we can do is hold down the shift key. It gives us this plus minus next to the cursor. If we hold the shift key down and select the background, it will deselect So now we're left with just this target. So if we use that same principle here, and let's just get rid of all of these lines, we'll shift deselect that, and that gets rid of those lines there. And we'll do the same thing here. Deselect the ground, and this will just select by itself. So let's set our new lines here into the corner. And I'm also going to do from here, hold down the shift key, and from this edge to the corner, and that should be good. And then we'll go from this to the corner. This tells us anything outside of this line, and we're into the side berm. So technically the popper is still okay. I think what we might do is just take both of these and just move them on my red axis. Come on, red axis. I forgot to pick up this barrel. Let's try that. So I want to make sure that I don't use my line tool, and I just want to make sure that we don't get caught in behind this target here. And in case you haven't figured it out, I don't pre-practice these tutorials, so my comments are ad hoc at best. Okay, so we're plenty of space between the barrel and this target. We can see the target from here. We're well into the back berm, and we haven't changed our visibility or lack of visibility from this port. So we're okay on that edge. We haven't dealt with much on this side. We'll revisit it. But now we've satisfied our spacing here, because we were at 12 meters before, and we just shifted this popper sideways, so we haven't changed any of our distances from here. We can double check it just to make sure. So when you go to do dimensions, if it typically assumes, and you can see how the dimensions moving parallel to the back berm there, it assumes a dimensional direction at first. Once you pick another spot, depending on, and all I'm doing is I'm just moving the mouse in different directions here. I'm not clicking anything, not holding shift or anything. So depending on here, it assumes that I want to be on the red axis, which is good for just linear dimensions. If I move it on the green axis in this direction, it assumes green axis. But if I kind of hold it, now it's on the blue axis. If I hold it more on a 45 degree, I guess you could call it, or parallel angle to this, this pink line is, I don't know how to explain it. It's more of a theoretical angle. It's guessing. I think you want to try, maybe you're talking about this. So this is the dimension that we're looking for, because it's parallel to the direction that we would be engaging that popper from. And we're still 12 meters, and that's good. Okay, so I can see we're going to run into the same issue. Our person, NS is his initials, would poke his head through here and engage these from the side. So we will duplicate our barrels and plunk those there, and that gets rid of that issue. So target through here, no issues there. The swinger here, we try to not have the stem of the popper, the swinger exposed. It's just a magnet for people accidentally shooting at it. Not that this barrel provides any protection at all, but it people don't focus on it. So now the arc is going to be, and this is actually another thing as far as you can have this swinger. He's done a good job of making sure that the target here is not visible when it's at rest. I'm going to presume for this example here that popper P1 activates the swinger. So there's no way from any of these ports, any of the shooting area for that matter, there's nowhere in here that you can see the swinger at rest without it being activated. And that's a lesson learned from another person, JB being his initials. Thank you for bringing that to light. So he's done a good job of isolating these so that they're not visible. We also like to make sure we protect the stem. The counterweight here, we're not terribly concerned about because there's no advantage to hitting it. I guess you could damage it, then you would damage it. When you do activate this from popper P1, as soon as this target is exposed on this side of the barrels, you have an exposure time from here, and then the swinger is going to rotate around here. It's going to come all the way down. Usually it comes just a little bit past 90. And it's just the way that the mass, depending on how heavy your counterweight is, you'll usually come just a little bit beyond 90 degrees, and then it'll come swinging back. And then it will eventually lose momentum and come to a rest wherever the counterbalance is opposite to the target. So this is a fairly long exposure, and depending on where we are, let's come down as if we're the shooter. Not a huge worry about ground impact. We can end up moving this target back a little bit, or there's some variance we can do to that to make sure that we don't, at the bottom of this swing pattern, we don't get ground impact. So just looking at the swinger by itself, if we were to take this barrel off and presume that this is not visible from here, now you can see we've greatly increased our visible area for our swinger, which makes the availability for people to track it a lot easier. So just by adding some barrels or some other vision barriers, let's just say we duplicated this. Now we just turned your available shooting window into this tiny little, I guess we'll plug this down, just this tiny little window right here. So just by adding a couple of vision barriers, we've greatly increased the difficulty of this target. So something to keep in mind. But as it sits right now, I think that's good. We've got lots of visibility here. This target, same thing. Because we've put this towards the back, we no longer have any ground impact issues. These targets are tall enough that there's no issues there as well. So center port looks good. Coming over to here, this here, we do have the ability for somebody to lean in and pick up this target from depending on whether they're a left-handed or a right-handed shooter, it'll make that easier. So you have to ask yourself, do you care? Is there any advantage or disadvantage or safety issue with them engaging this target from here? I would say no. I think giving people some flexibility is always a good thing. It adds versatility to your stages. So I don't really see an issue with that. If you were to lean too far over, you might have the possibility of engaging this popper. As long as it's not a safety issue, I don't really see a problem with that. I don't think that there's an advantage to making this swinger slow down enough. Some stages that's not designed very well, when you activate an activator, the shooter can go and do some other things, and when they come back, this has pretty much stalled, and then it becomes a stationary target. And while there's nothing wrong with that, it kind of defeats the purpose of your stage design. Which brings me to one other thing I forgot to mention here. When your swinger does come to rest, if it let's just say, for instance, that our counterweight in this position was down here. So at rest, this target is not visible. So that makes this a disappearing target, and therefore does not need to be engaged. So check your rule book for that. So plan for, if you want it to be a mandatory scoring target, which I kind of recommend you do, because you put the effort into making the stage, and for people to just blow by it and not engage it, it's kind of a waste of time building it. In some stages it makes sense, but in a lot of cases, don't make this a disappearing target. And by doing that, or to do that, just make sure that the target is visible at rest. So this target and the counterweight being opposite to each other, when the counterweight is down in the bottom, the target will be sticking straight up. Therefore, your target is visible at rest, and you're good to go. Oh, and here we've got no issues once again with side impact, so that's great. And if we come around this corner here, we have no real issues. These targets might be a little bit on the low side for looking at ground impact. People unfortunately have a tendency to shoot low when they are shooting fast. They have a tendency to yank the trigger. So I just drew this line. It should be a forensic bullet analyzer. Look at that. So if the average person, and I don't know how high that is. Let's find out. So we're sitting at about 3 feet. So if you're a shorter shooter, which is entirely possible, your pistol could be at a little bit lower angle, and if you yank your shot a little bit low, then we will run into an issue where this is going to impact here. So I mean, we can fix that by popping the entire target array up, but then we have to worry about the other extreme, is that same person is hitting the top of the target and we're out. I don't think our berm's going to be tall enough to contain that within the range. So we have kind of, what I might be tempted to do is, what about if we took this target here and replaced it I can't pick this other one. Here we go. If we swap these two around, my red and my green, red, I'm going to square this up. Let me get rid of this. I guess I probably should have just done this. Grab that corner and we will stick it beside here, and then we'll just move this guy over. So now we've taken away that the height issue. You could make this more challenging by throwing, you could still put a no shoot in here, which will keep the shots higher than normal. And we haven't changed the round count. This used to be a double target. That was a single. By swapping these around, we've just haven't changed the round count. Now, if I'm a shooter here, from here, shooters that are a little bit more cautious are going to go popper, and then swinger, and then pick up these stationary targets. The more aggressive shooters will go popper, static, static, swinger, and static, or they might go, depending on what the delay time here is, popper, static, 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 swinger, swinger, depending on where the arc comes of the swinger. So this is pretty good for risk versus reward. So a fast shooter will try to take these, but you got your no shoot in here, so it makes this a more challenging shot. The advantage is that if you are have you been doing your practices Thursday night, and know where your shots are going, and you're calm and cool under pressure, then your reward is that you pick up these targets and potentially even this target, saving a boatload of time. The risk is if you don't, then you're getting a whole bunch of penalties here. So that's actually not a bad idea. Yes, we run into the same issue here. We could probably do the same thing where we move these targets, the wall, add another half wall in here, and we push these targets back. Will definitely help our angling. There we go. So now our angles are reduced even more. Because there's nothing else over here, we could, in theory, these lines, let's get rid of these lines. Then shift to get rid of the background, delete those. Shift to get rid of the background, delete those. Let's plunk ourselves in some new lines. And from here, and they're not exactly lined up. We're spitballing here. You could, in theory, move these targets quite a ways back. And I picked up the background too. That's not going to work. You can move these targets way back here. We want to make sure that we're not going to be into the side berm here. Okay, so now we're still in this arc, but I mean we could throw in a couple of barrels, and there's 20 different ways we can accomplish this. What we're doing here is kind of just showing you some possibilities. There, so those barrels block our view from that port, and now we've moved these targets away, and we're well within the back berm impact, and we have significantly reduced our shoot through. This is our berm here is like, I don't know, 15 feet tall or 20 feet tall or something like that. So lots of flexibility in that respect. So I hope that, and then I think the rest of this fully complies with the IPSC rules. It's a fun stage. Like it's challenging, but not ridiculous. I believe this is a 32 round. 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12, 14, 16, 18, 22, 24, 26, 28, 30. I don't know if I counted that. So it's a 32 round stage. Let's find out why. So, I think he's made this as a not as a text tool. See how when we rotate this, the P1 always shows as facing the camera. But if we were to come over here, as we turn, the text stays planted on the ground like any other object would be. So I think he's got this set not as a, and I realized when I was looking at the video before, I said I had a hotkey and it was set to this 3D text. And I think he's got it set to just regular text. So my apologies for that. Get rid of these and let's see if I can find that swinger. Get rid of that. So we're going to go to the 3D tool and I find a text size of 0.3 meters. 0.03 P1. I was going to say the text should stay P2, and I do have no idea why all of a sudden this should stay a set. Oy. Two and SW1, sure. Okay, and then highlight all of these. We'll hit Q for rotate, because rotate starts with Q, of course. So my 0, 15, etc. So we want to go to 90. And that picked up everything. And let's hit the M key to move. I'm on the blue axis. I'm going to hold shift because I'm not going to be here for very long. And I'm going to the top of the popper as a reference point. I'm not sure why my P2 is higher than the other. But that's okay. These are just reference words. They don't have to be in exact spot. I'm going to move it up just a little bit more. Now I'm going to move this over on the green axis. Red axis, sorry. And onto the green. And now our P1 is lined up. Now I'll just grab this wording, bring it over to our swinger. And there's no rhyme or reason to the height that this needs to be. You just want it to be able to be visible from wherever your final camera angle is. That was loud. P2. Because we're at the same height as that initial popper P1, I don't think we need to adjust the height at all. There. And then we'll get rid of the lines. Oops. Control Z is the undo key, in case you didn't know. And there we go. Like I said, I'm not a big fan of the shadows. If you do want to turn them off, they're down here under View and Shadows. Turn that off. I guess you could probably turn it on at the very end if you're rendering. I just find it makes things a little bit cleaner. The other thing is, these barrels are full of edges and things in it, including the spout on the top. For our designs, they serve absolutely no purpose, and what they do is they eat up memory very fast. So one of the things we can do I'll make a copy of this barrel and I'm going to move it just outside here. I'm going to create a line from corner to corner and from edge to edge. That should be centered, and I'm going to create a circle from that point, and I'm going to move that over. So now I'm left with a circle, and I'm going to take and delete the insides of it. So now I just have, these are just lines, there's no body to it at all. I'm going to take and copy that with the M key and shift. I'm going to move that on the blue axis down to the bottom. And I'm going to do the same thing, M, on the blue axis. I'm going to find roughly the midpoint. Okay, now I can get rid of this barrel, and I'm going to draw a line from here to here, and basically reproduce that. That's interesting. I'm going to get rid of these lines. We'll reproduce them. This is just a quick example of what we're doing. I guess I shouldn't have done that. Let's leave those in for a minute. I want to make sure we're picking up the corners of the barrel itself. And now because this line I can tell is I've connected to the lines itself, because now it's made a rectangle. Like it's filled in the shape, which we don't really care about. We're going to end up deleting all of that. Not quite sure what happened there. Must have clicked on something. We'll just create a new circle. What we're trying to do here is reduce the face count. Get rid of these lines. For our example, so now we have just an outline of a barrel, and I'm going to create a group. So now I have the exact same shape as the barrel, but it helps me if I wanted to put this barrel in front of this target, but I want to see, make this a double barrel. So if I want to be able to see where that target is in behind the barrel, it still very clearly shows what's beyond there. And sometimes when you're trying to show, if I was making a layout for, I guess we're going to end up taking a screenshot of this and put this into our stage design so that we can reference it, how many rounds it is and whatnot. If the stage is full of barrels like this, we can't see what's going on beyond it. It makes it harder for people to kind of get a sense of what's going on. But this is very clear. Well, clearer, I should say. The other thing is especially when you have, like right now he has only one stage on his entire project, but I usually have multiple stages, stage 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, etc., etc. And when you're looking at one stage, that's not a problem. But when you start panning down here, and now it has to render all of this stuff at once. Granted, my computer is fairly powerful, but if it's not powerful, these walls do take up some memory, but the majority of this is from these barrels. I've done some tests and found that these are huge memory hogs. So by switching to these wireframe barrels, you accomplish the same thing. They're exactly the same size, but they take up significantly less computer resources. So food for thought. Yeah, so there's a few different ways of approaching this stage. We've gone from something that was very close in its execution to being this should. I would still go through this. I would close it for the day, and I would come back tomorrow and look at this with a fresh pair of eyes, or get somebody else to take a look at it, because a lot of things you don't even think about, like these targets here that were visible from this port. I bet you if Omar was to look at this 30 different times, something like that might not even register, because at the time you don't even think about it. But it's after doing 1 or 200 stages, uh, you kind of yeah, I still miss stuff. I miss stuff all the time, but it's good if you can try to catch as many of the things up front, and it's a learning process. So good job on this. I think you've got a really good grasp on this, and I would say set this aside and go make another stage. The other thing is we're going to go over here to the 3D warehouse, and we want to type in PCD HFC, and in here you will find a collection of should be able to just drag this right in. If you want to search for anything, you want to search for CCAN. I think it's called shipping container. Shipping container. And you will get shipping containers of all. You can get a boat with shipping containers on it. That would be a cool stage. Anything you want to look for. So if you want to look for IPSC, I find actually if you want to go for, you can get stages and other single props and things like that. You can actually find some stage design ideas in here. You can find pretty much anything. There's IPSC, IDPA is another one, and also USPSA. Anywhere in here you're going to find lots of different props and stuff, but be very careful. The ones in USPSA and IDPA are not necessarily IPSC compliant. So some of them are, some of them aren't. Use that at your own discretion. Anyway, I've been rambling on for long enough. Hope this helps. Good job on this stage, Omar. And if you have anything else, I'd be happy to take a look at it. Thanks a lot.